Captain Olivia Martinez had seen death before. Hell, she'd delivered it personally to pirates in the Outer Rim just last month. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the bone-chilling wail of the emergency klaxons that now screamed. Through every corridor of the UFS Defiant, her knuckles went white as she gripped the command chair. 23 years of military service, and her hands were actually shaking. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and you just know something terrible is about to happen? Yeah. Multiply that by 1,000.
Captain?
Lieutenant James Thompson spun around from his communication station, his usually composed face twisted with raw terror. The kid was fresh out of the academy, barely 25, with that clean-shaven look that screamed, "I've never seen real combat." Right now, he looked like he'd aged a decade in 10 seconds. "We're receiving an SOS from Deep Space Station Gamma 7. The transmission. It's fragmenting badly, ma'am." Olivia's stomach dropped. Gamma 7 wasn't just any outpost. It housed over 50,000 civilians, including the families of Earth's diplomatic corps. Her own sister Maria worked there as a xenobiologist. Thought hit her like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Put it through now," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. The holographic display crackled to life in the center of the bridge. What appeared made every officer present take an involuntary step backward. The alien commander, Krillian, she recognized from his distinctive forearms and crystalline skin, was covered in what could only be described as electric blue blood. His normally pristine white uniform hung in tatters, revealing deep gashes that sparked with energy behind him. The station's corridor was a nightmare. Emergency lights strobed like a disco from hell, while explosions sent chunks of metal and screaming crew members flying past the camera.
Ow!
The sound, God, the sound, was worse than the visuals. It was like listening to 1,000 people drowning in acid. The alien commander's forearms flailed desperately as he struggled to stay upright. His translator unit sparked and frittered, making his words sound like they were coming from the bottom of a deep well. "Please. Anyone listening. The Void Hunters have returned." His voice cracked with desperation that transcended species barriers. "Our defenses. They mean nothing to them. Earth fleet is our only hope." Then the transmission cut to static with a sound like reality itself tearing apart. Have you ever felt your blood turn to actual ice water? Because that's exactly what happened to Olivia in that moment. Her hands went numb, her vision tunneled. The bridge around her seemed to fade into background noise as one name echoed in her mind, like a death knell. Void Hunters. Every child in human space knew the stories. 3 centuries ago, when humanity first ventured beyond their solar system, they'd encountered something that made their worst nightmares look like bedtime fairy tales. The Void Hunters weren't just another hostile alien species. They were something far worse. They were perfection incarnate, evolved over millions of years into the ultimate killing machines. Picture this: beings that could survive in the vacuum of space, phase through solid matter, and regenerate from injuries that would vaporize a human instantly. They didn't just kill, they hunted for sport, keeping their prey alive for weeks while they slowly consumed them piece by piece. The lucky ones died from fear-induced heart attacks before the real torture began. The last confirmed Void Hunter sighting was during the Battle of Proxima Station in 2387. It took the combined might of 12 Earth battleships and 40,000 dead soldiers just to drive off a single scout ship. Since then, they'd vanished into the deep void between galaxies, and everyone hoped they'd stay gone forever. But hope, as Olivia's old drill sergeant used to say, was just disappointment waiting to happen, ma'am. Thompson's voice seemed to come from a million miles away. "Your orders." Olivia blinked hard, forcing herself back to the present. Around her, the bridge crew waited with the kind of tense silence you'd expect in a bomb disposal unit. Every eye was fixed on her, looking for leadership, for answers, for some miracle that would make this nightmare go away. Well, here's the thing about being a starship captain: sometimes you don't get miracles. Sometimes you just get the chance to make the enemy pay a higher price for victory than they ever imagined possible. "All hands, battle stations," she roared, her voice carrying across the ship's internal communication system. Every light on the bridge shifted from standard white to combat red, bathing everything in the color of blood and war. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. She turned to Thompson, noting how his trembling hands moved over his console with trained precision despite his obvious terror. Good kid, scared but functional. That's exactly what she needed right now. Send an emergency transmission to Earth Command. Maximum priority, all available frequencies. Tell them the Void Hunters are back, and Operation Deathworld is now active. Thompson's face went even paler, if that was possible. Operation Deathworld was humanity's ultimate contingency plans, the nuclear option they'd hoped never to use. It meant total war, no prisoners, no mercy, no holding back the darker aspects of human nature that had made them the most feared species in known space. But as Olivia stared out at the view screen, watching the darkness between the stars begin to writhe and shift like something alive, she knew they were long past the point of civilized warfare. Something was coming, something hungry and patient and utterly without mercy, and it was headed straight for Earth. 2 miles beneath the granite peaks of Colorado Springs, Admiral Noah Jackson stood like a statue carved from pure determination. The war room around him hummed with the desperate energy of a civilization fighting for its very existence. Holographic displays painted the walls in shades of red and orange, the colors of dying worlds and burning hope. You want to know what absolute fury looks like? Picture a man who'd spent 40 years defending humanity, watching as everything he'd sworn to protect got systematically torn apart by monsters that shouldn't even exist. Noah's weathered face could have been chiseled from stone, but his steel-gray eyes burned with the kind of rage that could melt. Tungsten, the tactical displays told a story that would make Dante rewrite his vision of hell. Its three-dimensional maps showed the Void Hunter swarm spreading across human space like spilled ink on white paper. Each red dot represented a colony, a station, a world where millions of people had been living their ordinary lives just hours ago. Now those dots were going dark one by one, winking out of existence as if they'd never mattered at all. Sir? Colonel Emma Rodriguez stepped forward, her normally steady voice cracking like thin ice under pressure. Emma was tough as nails, the kind of officer who'd once stared down a plasma cannon and asked if that was the best the enemy could do. But right now, even she looked like she'd seen the face of death itself. Preliminary casualty reports are coming in from the outer rim. Paused, and in that silence, you could hear the weight of worlds dying. It's in the millions, sir. But that's not the worst part. Her hands trembled as she manipulated the holographic display. They're not just conquering these worlds, they're harvesting entire populations. The survivors we've managed to contact. They're reporting that the Void Hunters are keeping people alive in some kind of organic processing facilities. Ever had one of those moments where reality just punches you in the gut? That's what happened to every person in that room. The idea of humanity being turned into livestock for alien predators was so fundamentally wrong that it made your soul want to crawl out of your body and hide. Noah's jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth.
Ow.
On the main display, the holographic battlefield showed Earth's pride and joy, the outer colonies that represented humanity's greatest achievements being consumed like appetizers at some cosmic dinner party. New Texas, with its sprawling cattle ranches and oil derricks that stretched to 3 suns, gone. 20 million people who'd built something beautiful out of empty desert, reduced to nothing but screaming static on long-range communications. Haven's Rest, the vacation paradise where Earth's elite went to forget their troubles on beaches made of crushed diamonds. The last transmission from there had been a tour guide calmly describing the sunset before something with too many teeth walked into frame. Prosperity, station humanity's greatest engineering marvel, a space city that housed 15 million souls and produced enough rare metals to power half the galaxy. Now it was just another debris field slowly spreading across the void. How long? Noah's voice cut through the room like a sword through silk. Every conversation stopped, every breath held, long until they reach Earth. Emma's fingers danced across her console, running calculations that would determine whether the human species had a future or just a very short present. At their current velocity and accounting for their feeding stops, Double quotes. She swallowed hard. 72 hours, sir. Maybe less if they don't bother harvesting the inner colonies. The room fell silent with the kind of quiet you get in churches and morgues. 72 hours. 3 days for humanity to either find a miracle or right. They're obituary in the stars, but here's the thing about humans that makes them different. From every other species in the galaxy, they're really, really bad at giving up. You can back them into a corner, threaten everything they love, and show them impossible odds. But instead of surrendering, they tend to get creative in ways that would terrify a nightmare. Every officer in that room knew the history. Earth had survived the Great Plague of 2157 that killed 2 billion people in 6 months. It clawed their way back from the nuclear exchange of 2203, when half the world's major cities turned into radioactive glass. They'd beaten climate change, resource wars, and 3 different attempts by artificial intelligence to wipe them out. You know what all those disasters had in common? They'd all underestimated exactly how mean humans could get when their backs were against the wall. Noah looked around the room at faces that belonged to men and women who'd never known defeat. These weren't politicians or bureaucrats. These were warriors who'd earned their scars in battles that would make other species wake up screaming. Each one of them carried the genetic memory of ancestors who'd survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other for millions of years. Gentlemen, ladies, Noah's voice carried the weight of every battle he'd ever fought, every friend he'd ever lost, every promise he'd ever made to protect the innocent. I want you to understand something. The Void Hunters think they're apex predators. They think they understand what it means to be dangerous. He smiled, and it was the kind of expression that would make a shark reconsider its life choices. They're about to learn why the rest of the galaxy calls us Deathworlders. He turned to his communications officer, a young man whose hands were already moving toward controls that hadn't been touched in decades. Activate every ship in the Ghost Fleet. Authorization code Lazarus 77. Wake the Reapers from cold storage. The Ghost Fleet. Ships that officially didn't exist, crewed by people who'd never been born. Armed with weapons that violated 17 different galactic treaties. Humanity's insurance policy against the day when playing nice stopped being an option. And Colonel Rodriguez? Noah's eyes found Emma across the room. Send the activation codes for Operation Deathworld to every human world. Every colony, every station from here to the Outer Rim. It's time to show these hunters what happens when they pick on the wrong prey. Red alerts began screaming across. Every human world, as 9 billion people learned, they're about to fight for the right to exist. The real question wasn't whether humanity would fight. The question was whether the universe could survive what they were about to unleash. Captain Liam Carter had been floating in absolute darkness for 6 hours, 13 minutes, and 27 seconds. The asteroid field around his stealth destroyer Shadow Strike provided perfect cover. But watching helpless civilians get slaughtered while you hide behind space rocks? That's the kind of thing that eats at your soul like acid. His ship hung motionless among the drifting boulders. Every system running silent, every crew member barely breathing. The Shadow Strike was humanity's most advanced predator, Ghost. Ship designed to appear and disappear like a bad dream. Right now, though, it felt more like a coffin drifting through a graveyard. Through the view screen, Liam watched the Void Hunter Vanguard systematically destroy the evacuation convoy from New Geneva Colony. 12 civilian transports loaded with families, kids, elderly folks who'd never hurt anyone in their lives. The aliens weren't just killing them, they were playing with them, like cats torturing mice before the final bite. You ever watch something so horrible that your brain tries to shut down just to protect itself? That was happening to half his crew right now. The other half were gripping their weapons controls so tight their knuckles had gone white as bone. "Captain," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Chen from the sensor station, bared her voice barely audible even in the deathly quiet of the bridge. "Transport vessel Hope's Dawn just went dark. That's all of them, sir." Liam's hands clenched into fists that could have cracked granite. Hope's Dawn had been carrying 300 children from the colony's primary school. Their teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had sent a final message 20 minutes ago. Tell Earth we died proud to be human. Here's where things get interesting. Most species in the galaxy, when faced with overwhelming odds, humans have this weird psychological quirk where impossible odds just make them angrier. Target their command vessel, Liam whispered into his headset, his voice carrying the kind of deadly calm you only hear right before someone does something spectacularly violent.
Ow.
These bastards just made their last mistake.
Ow.
The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew the math. One human destroyer against a Void Hunter battle group was like bringing a pocket knife to a nuclear war. But you know what? Sometimes the knife wins. Especially when it's wielded by someone too angry to care about dying. Sir. Weapons Officer Charlotte Kim spoke up from her station, her fingers already dancing across targeting controls. Charlotte was third-generation military. Her grandfather had fought in the Martian Rebellion. Her father had died defending Titan Station from pirates. Violence was literally in her DNA. Liam smiled, and it was the kind of expression that would make Death himself take a step backward. Fire everything. All at once. Make it count. The Shadow Strike dropped its stealth field and unleashed 6 centuries of human technological fury in a single devastating salvo. Quantum torpedoes, weapons that could punch holes in reality itself, streaked across space faster than thought. They hit the Void Hunter flagship shields and kept going, tearing through advanced alien defenses like they were made of tissue paper. Plasma cannons, followed up with streams of superheated death that could melt tungsten in microseconds. The alien ship's hull armor, supposedly impenetrable, turned into molten slag that sprayed across the vacuum in beautiful, deadly patterns. The Void Hunter flagship didn't just explode, disintegrated in a brilliant orange fireball that painted the asteroid field in shades of vengeance. For a moment, just a moment. The screams of dying civilians were replaced by the satisfying crackle of alien technology going critical. Direct hit, Charlotte shouted, pumping her fist in the air. That's one down for the good guys. But celebrations in space combat tend to be short-lived, kind of like birthday parties in minefields. The Shadow Strike's moment of triumph lasted exactly 14 seconds before reality came crashing back down, sir. Charlotte's triumphant grin vanished as her sensors lit up like a Christmas tree. Multiple contacts incoming. 50 ships. No, wait. 70. Jesus Christ, it's over 100 vessels. Liam's blood went cold as he watched the sensor display populate with more red dots than a case of measles. The Void Hunters had been expecting an ambush. They'd used the convoy massacre as bait to draw out any hidden human forces. Like an idiot, he'd taken it. One destroyer against 100 alien warships, even his grandmother who'd survived. The siege of Europa by eating boot leather and shooting pirates with a hunting rifle would have called those odds a bit unfair. Captain, his navigation officer called out, voice cracking with barely controlled panic, recommend immediate withdrawal. We can jump to hyperspace in 30 seconds. Liam stared at the approaching swarm of enemy ships, each one carrying enough firepower to crack a moon. Running made perfect tactical sense. It was the smart play, the survival play, the thing any reasonable commander would do. But then he thought about Mrs. Patterson and her 300 kids. He thought about the families who'd died screaming while he hid in the shadows. He thought about Earth, somewhere behind them. Waiting for monsters to come knocking, that's when his sensors detected something that made him smile like a man who'd just been dealt for aces in a poker game with the devil. Massive energy signatures. We're approaching from Earth's direction, the kind of power readings that made stars look like birthday candles. His communications officer was picking up familiar transponder codes. Ship registries that officially didn't exist. Call signs from vessels that were supposed to be myths. The stars themselves seemed apart like curtains as Admiral Jackson's. Dreadnought Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace with all the subtlety of an angry god. Battle cruisers that looked like flying cathedrals of destruction. Carriers bristling with fighter squadrons, destroyers, frigates, and things that didn't have names because they'd been designed to fight wars that hopefully would never happen. Each vessel bore the scars of countless battles, hull plates welded over ancient wounds, weapon systems that had been upgraded and modified until they barely resembled their original designs. These were weapons of war, crewed by warriors who'd volunteered for missions with mortality rates that would make kamikaze pilots think twice. Admiral Jackson's voice boomed across every communication frequency in the star system, carried by transmitters, powerful enough to reach neighboring galaxies. When he spoke, it was with the authority of 9 billion humans who'd decided they were tired of being hunted. This is Admiral Jackson of the Earth Defense Fleet to all Void Hunter vessels. You wanted to hunt humans? There was a pause. Just long enough for the alien commanders to realize they'd made a tactical error that would be studied in military academies for the next 1,000 years. Congratulations, you found us. The real war was about to begin, and, for the first time in 3 centuries, the Void Hunters were about to learn what it felt like to be prey. Commander Mia Foster had seen a lot of crazy things in her 12 years as a fighter pilot. She'd dogfighted pirates through asteroid fields, raced solar flares to save stranded miners, and once landed a crippled fighter on a moon with nothing but manual controls and pure stubbornness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the cosmic nightmare unfolding outside her cockpit window. Picture the largest fireworks display you've ever seen. Then multiply it by the population of Texas and set it all on fire. That's what the space around her looked like as the biggest battle in galactic history erupted in sheets of plasma and quantum fire. Her fighter Hellstorm bucked and rolled through the chaos like a leaf in a hurricane, while explosions lit up the darkness in colors that had no names. Human ships moved through the battlefield with a deadly grace that would make sharks jealous. They struck like pack hunters, coordinated, ruthless, and absolutely relentless. Watch a nature documentary about wolves taking down prey sometime, and you'll get the idea. Except these wolves were made of titanium and fury, armed with weapons that could vaporize mountains. The Void Hunters, on the other hand, swarmed like angry hornets, whose nest had just been kicked by a very stupid giant. Their ships moved in patterns that hurt to look at, organic curves and impossible angles that seemed to bend space around them. They were beautiful in the way that poisonous snakes are beautiful, right before they bite you. Phoenix Squadron, form up on me. Mia screamed into her comm unit as a pack of alien fighters dove toward her position like bats out of hell. Her voice cracked with the kind of fury that comes from watching everything you love get torn apart by monsters. These bastards want a fight. Let's give them one they'll never forget. You want to know what real rage looks like? 3 weeks ago, the Void Hunters had hit New Eden Colony while Mia was on patrol duty, 2 systems away. By the time she got back, there was nothing left but burning ruins and silence. Her parents, her little brother Jake, who wanted to be a pilot just like his big sister, her fiancé Marcus, who'd been planning to propose on her birthday next month, all gone, turned into organic slurry in the aliens' harvesting facilities. That kind of loss doesn't just break your heart. It forges something new and terrible in the empty space where your heart used to be. Her fighter. Hellstorm rolled and twisted through the enemy formation like a dancer performing ballet with explosives. The Neuralink system responded to her. Thoughts faster than conscious commands. Think kill that one, and the weapons fired. Think dodge left, and the ship obeyed. It was like having superpowers. Superpowers involved turning alien fighters into expanding clouds of superheated gas. Each pulse blast from her cannons found its mark with surgical precision. Void Hunter fighters spun into the void, trailing flames and screaming radio static, their organic hulls splitting open like overripe fruit. Mia counted 15 kills in the first 2 minutes of combat, but who's keeping score when you're this angry? But here's the thing about the Void Hunters that made them the galaxy's most feared predators. They learned fast. Really fast. We just watched you kill our buddies, and now we know exactly how to counter your tactics. Fast. Massive bioships began emerging from hyperspace around the battlefield, and calling them ships was like calling a hurricane a little breeze. These things were the size of space stations, grown rather than built, pulsing with veins of bioluminescent energy that looked disturbingly like arteries. They bristled with organic cannons that fired concentrated death in forms that violated several laws of physics. Well, come on. Mia shouted at her view screen as one of the bioships disgorged what looked like a swarm of flying jellyfish armed with plasma stingers. Are you kidding me with this stuff? What's next? Space zombies? The universe apparently had a sense of humor, because that's exactly when the bioships started launching pods that looked suspiciously like coffins with engines. Each one cracked open to reveal something that used to be humanoid but definitely wasn't any more Void Hunter. Shock troops that had been modified into living weapons, Mia's squadron scattered as the space around them, filled with horrors that would give H.P. Lovecraft nightmares. But Phoenix Squadron wasn't called the best for nothing. These pilots had trained together, fought together, and bled together across a dozen different battlefields. They moved like parts of the same deadly machine. Phoenix 2, you've got hostiles. On your 6? Mia called out as she watched Lieutenant Rodriguez's fighter get swarmed by organic interceptors. Copy that, Phoenix Leader? Rodriguez replied with the kind of calm you only get from people who've accepted that they're probably going to die, but plan to take as many enemies with them as possible, coming around for another pass. That's when Admiral Jackson's voice cut through the chaos like a sword through silk, carrying across every communication frequency with the authority of someone who'd just decided to end the universe's longest-running joke. All units, execute Protocol Omega. Authorization, Ragnarok 77. The effect was immediate. Every human pilot in the battle zone went dead silent for exactly 3 seconds, the amount of time it takes for your brain to process that you've just been authorized to use weapons that could crack moons in half. Mia's blood turned to ice water in her veins. Protocol Omega was humanity's ultimate contingency plan. Stuff of legends and nightmares whispered about in military academies. These were weapons so devastating that even humans who had a disturbing tendency to weaponize everything from kitchen utensils to gravity itself were scared of them. Across the battlefield, human ships began powering up weapon systems that had been sealed away in the deepest vaults of Earth's military installations. Planet-killer missiles that could turn worlds into asteroid fields, quantum disruption bombs that deleted matter from existence, reality-warping generators that could turn the laws of physics into suggestions. The Void Hunters were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy called humans Deathworlders, not because Earth was dangerous, but because Earth had produced the most creatively destructive species in known space. Mia felt her fighters, quantum warhead system, come online with a hum that seemed to resonate in her bones. These weren't ordinary nukes. They were weapons that punched holes in space-time itself, turning enemy ships into brief, bright flowers of annihilation. Phoenix Squadron, she called to her pilots, her voice carrying the weight of every human who'd ever died fighting for the right to exist. You know what they say about cornering a wounded animal? She armed her weapons and dove toward the nearest bioship, which was roughly the size of Manhattan and twice as ugly. For humanity, she roared into the as her targeting computer locked onto something that looked like the alien vessel's brain. Let's show these things why you should never hunt apex predators. The real question wasn't whether the humans would win. The question was whether there would be anything left of this star system when they were done. 18 hours. That's how long the final battle raged. 18 hours of pure, unfiltered hell that redefined what warfare meant in the 24th century. When the plasma storms finally cleared and the last explosion faded to silence, space looked like a cosmic graveyard where gods had come to die. Captain Olivia Martinez stood on what remained of her bridge, breathing recycled air that tasted like blood and burnt metal. The UFS Defiant hung in the void like a wounded animal, its hull scarred by weapons that could melt continents, atmosphere bleeding from a dozen different breaches. Around her ship floated the wreckage of 2 entire fleets, twisted metal and organic matter that had once been the pride of 2 civilizations. You know that feeling when you've been in a car accident and you're still alive but you can't quite believe it? That's what survival felt like right now. Every breath was a gift. Every heartbeat a small miracle in a universe that had just tried very hard to erase humanity from existence. Her crew, what was left of them, moved through their duties with the mechanical precision of people who had seen too much horror to process it all at once. Half her officers were dead or wounded, the other half running on nothing but caffeine, adrenaline, and the kind of stubborn fury that kept humans fighting long after any sensible species would have surrendered. Captain Lieutenant Thompson's voice cracked like old leather as he hunched over his damaged console. The kid had aged about 10 years in the last 18 hours. His boyish face now etched with lines that spoke of watching friends die in creative and horrible ways. Enemy flagship is still operational. Sensors show minimal damage to their core systems. Of course it was, because the universe apparently had a twisted sense of humor that involved keeping the worst monsters alive just long enough to gloat over their victories. "They're hailing us, ma'am," Thompson added, his hands trembling as they moved over controls that sparked and smoked. Should I put them through?" Olivia almost laughed. Almost here they were, beaten to within an inch of extinction, and the aliens wanted to chat. It was like being mugged and having the mugger ask if you wanted to discuss philosophy. While he went through your pockets, "Put 'em on screen," she ordered, straightening her torn uniform and trying to look like a starship captain instead of a refugee from a demolition derby. The main display flickered to life, and what appeared made everyone on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. The Void Hunter Queen was nightmare fuel given physical form, a creature that looked like someone had crossed spider with a dragon and then taught it advanced mathematics. She was massive, easily 12 feet tall, with chitinous armor that reflected light in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Her face, if you could call it, that sported too many eyes arranged in geometric patterns that definitely weren't natural. Each eye burned with intelligence that was both ancient and utterly alien. Claws the size of sword blades dripped with bioluminescent poison that glowed like liquid stars. And when she moved, you could hear the sound of metal scraping against bone. When the Queen spoke, her voice carried the sound of 1,000 screams echoing through empty corridors. It was the audio equivalent of fingernails on a chalkboard. If the chalkboard was made of human souls, and the fingernails belonged to something that had crawled out of the deepest pit of hell. "Deathworlders," she hissed, the word dripping with contempt and something that might have been respect. "You have fought well. Better than any prey species we have encountered in 3 million years of hunting." There was a pause, during which you could practically hear her savoring the moment like fine wine. "But you are few, and we are infinite. Your ships burn, your worlds lie broken, your species bleeds from wounds that will never heal. Surrender now, and we will make your death swift. Continue this futile resistance, and we will ensure that humanity's screams echo across the galaxy for 1,000 generations." The bridge fell silent except for the hiss of escaping atmosphere and the distant sound of dying systems. Every human in the room knew the math. They were the last functioning ship in the fleet, facing an enemy that had just proven they could survive anything humanity could throw at them. But here's the thing about humans that makes them unique in the galaxy. They're really bad at knowing when they're beaten. Olivia stood slowly, feeling every bruise and cut from 18 hours of combat. Her uniform was torn and bloody, her face marked by hours of desperate fighting, but her eyes burned with something that made the Void Hunter Queen lean back slightly, behind her. Visible through the shattered viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel in the darkness. Scarred by orbital bombardments, bleeding atmosphere from the alien attacks, but still there, still beautiful, still home to 9 billion humans who refused to go quietly into that good night. "You want to know what makes us different?" Olivia asked quietly, her voice carrying across the bridge with the authority of someone who just decided to rewrite the rules of the universe. Every other species in this galaxy evolved to survive. They learned to hide, to run, to adapt to whatever threatened them. She smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression the Void Hunter Queen had ever seen. Not because it was cruel or savage, but because it was absolutely confident in a way that suggested the human knew something. The alien didn't. "But Earth," Olivia continued, her voice rising with each word, "Earth taught us something different. Earth taught us to win." The Queen's multiple eyes narrowed, and for the first time in millions of years of hunting, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: uncertainty. "Computer," Olivia called out to the ship's AI, her voice carrying the weight of every human who'd ever lived and died for the right to exist. Execute final protocol. Authorization. Remember Terra? The effect was immediate and impossible. Deep. In Earth's core, buried beneath miles of rock and metal in vaults that officially didn't exist, humanity's ultimate weapon came online. Not a bomb or a laser or any kind of conventional weapon, but something far more dangerous, a signal that reached across time and space to touch something that should have been impossible. Every human ship that had ever been destroyed, every warrior who had ever fallen, every colonist who had ever fought for their home, they all heard the call. The signal reached into quantum dimensions where information never truly dies, where the patterns of consciousness can exist independent of flesh and metal. Across the galaxy, the ghost fleet rose from their graves. 10,000 human vessels materialized. From hyperspace, phasing into reality like vengeful spirits answering a summons from beyond death itself. These weren't ordinary ships, they were crewed by digital souls, consciousness patterns preserved in quantum matrices, the uploaded minds of every human who'd ever died fighting for their species. The Void Hunter Queen's scream of terror was lost in the roar of humanity's final charge as 10,000 ships worth of concentrated fury descended upon her fleet like the wrath of angry gods. When the last alien ship fell dark and silent, when the final Void Hunter had been reduced to cosmic dust, Admiral Jackson's voice echoed across all frequencies with the authority of a species that just proven they were the galaxy's true apex predators. This is Earth's command to all survivors. The hunt is over. Humanity remains. The galaxy is safe. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors among the wreckage, one thing became crystal clear to every species watching from their safe little corners of the universe. The Deathworlders hadn't just won a battle, they had proven that. Some predators should never, ever be awakened. The end.